For some reason my chat is not firing in the automated system that I have here in the actual streaming software, so I'll be coming over to my actual YouTube channel, which means it may take me a couple of seconds to get onto what's actually happening on the chat. Please be aware of that. It does say publishing YouTube broadcast 100%, so I'll be able to click that, and then I'll be able to say hello to everyone, get into what we will be covering today, and of course answer any questions that come in. That really is the meat, as it were, of these live streams, is these things. Please do let me know if there are any issues with sound or any issues like that. I want to make sure I'm giving you as much information as I can, and I can't do that if you can't hear a word I am saying. So welcome Abiram. My day is going pretty good, thank you very much for asking. I always appreciate the little hellos like that. Okay, so I've got quite a bit that I have ready to go through. I don't know how quickly this room will fill up. Last couple of weeks, like last week this time, we had a 1 hour 20 recording, essentially, whereby I was answering quite a lot of questions from quite a lot of different people. That was fantastic. Very happy with that. But I do still like to have a few things written up just while the room fills up, and in case we get to a point where I just need to talk about wrestling in general, if we've not got that many questions in. So while everything fills up, I'm going to start with a review for NXT Takeover 30, which has of course happened last night. Any NXT fans will have been watching that. AEW Dynamite also took place at the same time yesterday. I unfortunately was not able to watch that because I was on Backstage Heat, which is the new Twitch show. If you want to follow there, it's twitch.tv/backstage team. So let's talk about NXT Takeover. If you have any questions, please do remember to drop them in the chat. Please do remember to click like on the video. Let's talk NXT. The show opened with Finn Balor versus Timothy Thatcher, and I've got to say this match would not have been out of place in the Tokyo Dome. It was very strong style, which for me is Finn Balor at his best. Some of the best memories I have of Finn Balor are his days wrestling in New Japan, and the natural intensity of Timothy Thatcher really added to that. His match with Matt Riddle, of course, is very well remembered because of the natural intensity of it. That's a great thing, and they were able to combine incredibly well to do this. I think at some point backstage, one of them turned to the other and said, "So, just going to try and kill you. Is that cool?" To which the other one responded, "Yeah, I'm going to do the same." The double stomps in particular were rough landings, were just wonderfully rough landings, I tell you, and I have no complaint about that. I'm always very happy to see a match with this level of intensity, and it really helps to sell a feud, even though, to be fair, there wasn't really a feud to speak of. Our next match was the ladder match between Johnny Gargano, Bronson Reed, Cameron Grimes, Damian Priest, and the Velveteen Dream, who was of course a late addition. I'm not surprised that Damian Priest won this match. I feel after a considerable losing streak, this was a good way to rebuild him, and I think he'll be a very good champion going forwards. I think he's got everything it takes to be a big deal in NXT and potentially a big deal on the main roster, and certainly he's got the range and the athleticism to do that. So I'm glad he won the match. I will say the ladder match in general had a few mistakes in it. There were a couple of over rotations. Velveteen Dream nearly cleared both tables and the camera didn't pick up the dive there. But in addition to that, there were a lot of very good moments, particularly as regards Grimes and Reed. I haven't seen much of either of these two men, but I was very impressed, and I will definitely remember them going forwards. It can't match up to the 5-star ladder match that we had quite recently when the North American Championship was first introduced, but I like that that championship is now really connected to ladder matches, much like the Intercontinental Championship used to be. Hello, WrestleNews365. WrestleNews365 asks, thoughts on the Thunderdome? Will aspects alter or change? I can't say I'm too overly impressed with the Thunderdome, but I do think it was a very good start. I think the appearance and everything, and the way they're doing entrances with the pyro and the Fiend, for example, having everything appear across the whole thing, is a great way to use that Thunderdome concept. But I do think there are definitely going to be alterations as to who gets on the screens. There was a very low energy feel to SmackDown, Part of that comes down to the fact that WWE did not get the application that they were expecting, and they definitely didn't get the application that they were hoping for. With a lack of people going for it, we got things like the teddy bear on a screen. A lot of people took advantage a little bit. Those people will not come back. So I do feel the people that were chanting Lucha and doing Lucha House Party, their people will see more of going forwards. So there will be changes. Welcome Jacob Mendoza, welcome to the channel. Abiram asks, on that note, does NXT need the Thunderdome? NXT, I wouldn't say needs the Thunderdome. I think the feel of the small amount of crowd and developmental talent around it is a very good thing, and it really helps NXT because the sort of, underground feel of NXT has always been a selling point. So I think that's a big help. I wouldn't say they need the Thunderdome because of that. Manny Santos says, do you expect a lot more pyro than SmackDown for Superstars? I do. I think almost everyone at SummerSlam will be getting pyro, or at least some sort of entertainment value like that. I did like how NXT TakeOver had fire. That was a great touch. But I do expect entrances to be even more impressive for SummerSlam, particularly the 3D effect, where I hear they've been doing very interesting things in order to keep it interesting and exciting. Welcome, Alfie. Thank you for joining me here. Okay. No more questions at the moment. If you have any questions, please do remember to drop them in. Anyone new who's just joined us, welcome to the chat. By all means, ask questions, and please do remember to click like. So I'm now up to McAfee versus Cole for the NXT TakeOver review, which was a very pleasant surprise. I think Pat McAfee did cover himself in quite a bit of glory, and a large part of this is keeping it quite simple. There were some very brave moments. The dive to the outside was very good. The backflip and then leap onto the top rope was incredibly impressive. Just incredibly impressive. I'm not aware of many people who can do that, and McAfee definitely showed that he has skill. I don't know if he has a skill to make it all the way in NXT, but I think he definitely has a skill to give it a damn good try. Adam Cole didn't carry him to a great match. They had an okay match, but he wasn't carried. Adam Cole did his part and his part only. Also, right winner. I think Adam Cole was definitely the right winner, and it was a conclusive victory in the end. Manny Santos says the reason it was lacking energy is because you can't see anything. It's really laggy, like the pins were missed on screen. Thanks for that information. If you've been there watching it, it's very important that we can get information like that and more information. If it was really laggy, that the pinfalls in particular was something I picked out because there was no reaction to pinfalls. The only time I can really say I felt the Thunderdome helped the situation is when Sonya Deville first appeared on screen and she got a cheer. That was important to me, and if you watch this stream on Friday, you'll know I've been actively campaigning for that. Ed Fries, welcome. Once again, thank you, Ed, for gifting me a subscription to the Going in Raw podcast over on Twitch. I'm very grateful of that. It says, should we expect surprises for the next couple of weeks of TV now that they are in the Thunderdome? I would say yes. There are a number of people who are almost fit to return or almost ready to return. Sami Zayn is someone I would definitely say. Xavier Woods was ready to return, or there and thereabouts, just before he got the gig at Talking Smack, so I suspect he'll have a little more time off. This is ideally to give Big E the remainder of his push first. And then after that, for example, Xavier Woods was on TV recently, you just might not have been able to recognize him. Outside of that, I don't see Roman returning, but AOP is someone I can definitely see returning soon because I do feel the Street Profits need new challenges. I suspect the Street Profits will be winning tonight. Welcome Christian Reeve says, hey Tom, thoughts on AEW's latest show? I thought it was excellent, set up a lot of future storylines. I haven't watched all of it yet. I do think now is the right time for Brody Lee to win a championship, and I don't know what the whole mimosa thing is. Jericho versus Orange Cassidy is for a certain niche of fandom. It really is, and I have no issue with that. I'm excited to see what they do, and I feel if they had live crowds to a full capacity, it would be the hottest angle night in, night out. But what I will say is at the moment, they are struggling to get those viral moments that they used to get when they first started. Some of that comes down to less hirings, but it seems as though AEW are struggling to get the huge viral moments they did. It could just be a sign that they are settling down and starting to focus a bit more on day-to-day storytelling and long-term storytelling instead of the big moment series that a lot of wrestling is built around. That's a good thing for me, and I do feel Cody Rhodes did the right thing here, and in fact So did Brandy Rhodes in losing her match as well. Ed Fry says Pat took everything seriously and didn't just try to play wrestler. That is a very fair point. Pat McAfee definitely trained hard, he worked hard, and he wasn't just in there for a celebrity spot. It shows that he does love wrestling. That's true of Ronda Rousey, that's true of Shayna Baszler, that's why they were such good wrestlers. And it's why if you look back at, for example, WCW, when they had people coming in for that celebrity spot, it looked a joke then. Pat McAfee did not look a joke in the ring. He looked like a wrestler. Wrestling News 365 said it lagged really bad. This is the Thunderdome. I had to watch on TV even though I was in the Thunderdome. See, that really does work against the whole format. The whole concept of the Thunderdome is based around being able to watch live and in real time as much as anything else. And if you're having to watch on TV just to keep up with what's going on, then the concept has failed. And you'll get pops in the wrong direction at the wrong times. Abraham says it's annoying that they're pumping in audio rather than allowing reactions in the Thunderdome. I would say it's annoying that they're pumping in audio. Yes, you can definitely hear the false audio that they have, but at the same time, I think it needs to happen because the Thunderdome isn't working right now. However, it was a real beta test, an open beta for SmackDown, so there are a lot of teething issues that they will have to work out. SummerSlam hopefully will be more successful. Welcome, Lewis. Nice to see a familiar face in here. Christian Reeve says, reckon it's the right time for Drew to drop the belt. I don't know who else he has to face. Now, personally, in my predictions for this, I've gone with a no contest. I think Retribution are going to get involved because eventually they have to do something. But for me, I don't think there is a bad result here as long as it's a clean finish. If Orton wins, I am happy. If McIntyre wins, I am happy. No complaints there. Swaggy says, what are you hoping to see from SummerSlam tonight? A lot of clean finishes. We're not going to get them. I would hope to see all of the 3 women's matches get clean finishes. I am most excited for all 3 of them, particularly what was hair versus hair. That's obviously taken a bit of a hit in my excitement levels because of the real life situations that have changed things there. But at the same time, I'm very excited to see the Fiend take on Braun Strowman. I think that's really caught a lot of casual attention as well, and I'm glad to see the Fiend back. And Manny Santos asked, do you see Mandy and Sonya getting time, or will it be short? It'll be shorter than it was intended to be, but they will get a full match out of it. Okay, I'm out of questions at the moment. Please, if you have any questions, do drop them in the chat. I will answer them as soon as I am finished with the conversation topic of the NXT Takeover review. I do drop in and out of each match to answer questions, and if you're just joining me, welcome. Please do click like on the video. That helps me to get more eyes on it. So the next match I have is Io Shirai versus Dakota Kai. Now, there's a lot of play here even before we talk about the actual match. There were initial concerns of a possible concussion to Io Shirai. However, those concerns were quickly allayed. They did a very quick check of her pupils and it all seemed fine. That is why you will see Dakota Kai, after a pinfall, the referee came, pinched her thigh to make sure he had her attention, and then did this. Checking the eyes. That's what that means. Now, in addition to this, Dakota Kai's gear was inspired by Hana Kimura. That's a very touching tribute and a very valuable thing to see. I always respect things like that. There is an initial concept that maybe this will be Dakota Kai getting a call-up. However, to my knowledge, there is no plan to do that. One of the reasons being there are too many female heels on Raw and SmackDown right now, and not enough faces, at least at the top level, to actually feud with Kai. It would either have to be Asuka versus Kai, or it would be Liv Morgan and Ruby Riott versus Kai. And then on the SmackDown side, maybe Carmella would return and feud with her, but that would be it. They would really struggle in that regard. Outside of that, I thought this was an okay match. The stunted start really did work against them, but that's nobody's fault. And hopefully there is a match between Shirai and Ripley coming soon, because after the stare down between Raquel Gonzalez and Rhea Ripley, I've got to say I am very excited for that one. I did mention on Twitter, but I'll mention it here as well. The intergender match, if I could only have one that I would want, would be a Rhea Ripley versus Drew McIntyre. That's just an amazing concept to me. Ed Fry asks, is The Miz coming out super late a red herring in terms of something with Retribution? Yes, it is. It's long established that The Miz is a coward. That is all they are suggesting there, but they are trying to suggest he may be involved in Retribution. To my knowledge, he is not involved with the group at all. Christian Reeve says, what about Fiend versus Strowman? I personally want Fiend to win and beat a returning Goldberg. Goldberg is unlikely to return for a little while yet. If he doesn't wrestle both his matches in a calendar year, they go to the next year. However, this year he has already wrestled both of his calendar matches, so he will not return until the earliest of January. They could potentially try and have his matches early and work through his contract faster, but I don't think they're going to want to do that. Sorry, accidentally elbowed my TV. So I can't see Goldberg returning, even though I would like The Fiend to get his win back. I just can't see that match being particularly desirable for a lot of people. And I do think The Fiend is going to win, though, and I am worried that there is a definite lack of opposition available. I'd like to see The Fiend versus Big E. That's what I'd like to see. Jacob says, do you think Randy will win the belt, then face Edge at WrestleMania? Personally, I don't. One of the key reasons for that being, what happens to Drew McIntyre? If the idea as is pitched, because I've mentioned in these channels, I have reported on numerous occasions, Edge is due back for around the Royal Rumble, so I would expect Edge's return to be at the Royal Rumble, in the Royal Rumble. I wouldn't expect him to win the match, though, primarily because it buries a lot of people if your top stars are only there for 5 matches a year, and Edge is only there for 5 matches a year. As exciting as Edge is, it would be another Brock Lesnar situation if he won the championship. I'm not against Orton keeping the championship in a match like that, but I do feel when it comes to WrestleMania, they space out their draws a little differently. You tend to have one mainstream star who's reached that level, like a Randy Orton, like an Edge, against someone else. That's why we had Seth Rollins versus Kevin Owens. That's why many years back we had Randy Orton versus Seth Rollins, to elevate those people. Gavin Whitby says, first time watching the live stream, welcome, thank you for joining me. Do you think we will see the hacker return tonight? The LCD screens could help this happen. I don't think we'll see the hacker tonight. I think it will be a while yet, and I think with the hacker, if you haven't already watched it, I do have a video about the hacker storyline that was originally intended and how it has changed. It is on this channel. It is back in June that you can check out. But the changes that were made essentially mean that the hacker storyline as of right now is there purely to write people out of corners. So if a writer has written themselves into a corner, bam, hacker, easy. I think one of the key reasons that you can see that has definitely been the case is that Sonya Deville was exposed by the hacker and never once has even mentioned the hacker since. Swaggy says The Miz was complaining about not being in the title picture in a couple of years on Talking Smack. I agree. I think The Miz has got championship written all over him, but I don't think he's going anywhere near Bray Wyatt again, I'll tell you that. Our next match on the NXT Takeover preview was Keith Lee versus Carrion Cross. Now, this was a very confusing finish. It came a bit out of nowhere for me, but I have been able to confirm since the finish was rushed due to Carrion Cross's dislocated shoulder. It was not the originally planned finish. It was still planned that Keith Lee would be losing clean, just not like that. And it begs a few questions because it's a very short title reign, and does suggest to me, after Keith Lee has lost both of his championships in a way that hasn't happened with many other double champions, that we may see Keith Lee moving to Raw very soon. I don't think it'll happen at SummerSlam. I don't think it will happen until after Payback, but I do think it will happen, that we will see Keith Lee at Raw sooner rather than later. When it comes to Carrion Cross, there is unfortunately a bit of a weakness at the top of the card in NXT right now. They're not wanting to throw Gargano in there immediately. They're not wanting to throw Ciampa in there immediately, or Balor. These are all heels, and Carrion Cross is a heel. So the idea now is they can start to develop their face audience a bit more. We are looking at a very long title reign for Carrion Cross, I will tell you that. But the number one guy in NXT at the moment, when you talk about depth charts, is Finn Balor. Carrion Cross might be the champion, but Carrion Cross is still not considered as being the number one guy in NXT by people in NXT. That is everything for my takeover review. Let's answer a few more questions and then I'll go on to a preview of SummerSlam, shall I? WrestleNews 365 says, if Shane McMahon becomes executive director of Raw, where does this leave Stephanie, Triple H and Shane in WWE succession plan post Vince McMahon? I reported on this channel about 6 months ago that the ideal for Vince McMahon is for Shane McMahon to take over the company when Vince McMahon eventually retires. I say retires, it's Vince McMahon, so it will probably be when Vince McMahon retires, and by that I mean dies in the chair while talking people through a Raw show when he's 104. It's Vince McMahon, I totally believe it. Shane McMahon is someone that they want to have more involved. He has been a lot more involved creatively. I've been reporting on that for the last few weeks. Essentially, when it comes to Shane McMahon's story, this is definitely the channel you want to be following and subscribing for updates on that one. However, when it comes to the executive director position, there are very disputing reports on this. We have on one side someone saying that one source told them that there was an idea that Shane McMahon could become the executive director of Raw. However, that has been disputed by a couple of websites and probably the biggest wrestling journalist in the game, as it were. So it's been disputed. I've been unable to get any firm information on that as a concept, just that Shane McMahon is very popular with his creative ideas. That's why he was involved in the Royal Rumble booking, and it's why Raw Underground, he has been allowed to run with it. And I've got to say, Raw Underground has really hit its stride recently. I'm enjoying it more than I expected to. Christian Reeve says, who do you think the hacker is likely to be? The hacker was originally Mustafa Ali. I can say that for certain. However, at the moment, the hacker doesn't have a physical person behind it. Much like Sister Abigail, there is no longer a person behind the hacker. It is simply a narrative device that they wheel out for storylines. They may make someone the hacker in future just to suit a storyline, but it will not be the original intended person who was Mustafa Ali. Jacob Mendoza says, were there any matches added to SummerSlam today? To my knowledge, there were not, unless they were added in the past 20 minutes, because I have naturally been here talking on this live stream and I'm not keeping up to date with anything that broke. To my knowledge, the only change to the card at all is the fact that Apollo Crews versus MVP is on the pre-show for the United States Championship for the second pay-per-view in a row. Christian Reeve says, do you think Dolph Ziggler will just continue to be used as an elevator guy and not receive any proper run? Yes, I do. That has been the case since 2013, I believe, where Dolph Ziggler pretty much existed purely to help other people elevate themselves. He essentially has been working as an enhancement talent. To my knowledge, he's become more and more of a leader in the locker rooms, and people are very, very happy with the work that he's doing. So I can't see any reason he would have to change that. Matthew Charles says, Tom, not like you staying up until God knows when tonight. 4 a.m. Hopefully, and not 5. Before I drop in and say have a good night and enjoy SummerSlam, my friend. Thank you very much, Matthew. And the same to you when you do eventually watch SummerSlam, probably tomorrow morning at a sane time. You are the smarter of the two of us. Swaggy says, who do you think will be the next breakout star in NXT, one male and female? Well, I would normally say Rhea Ripley here, but I believe she's already reached breakout star status. I am a huge fan of Dakota Kai, not just because she's been in this particular match last night, but I've been following her for a number of years, particularly her work as Evie in Japan. My favourite match of the original Mae Young Classic was Dakota Kai versus Rhea Ripley. So I would definitely say Dakota Kai, next big female breakout star. For males, I was very impressed by Cameron Grimes, even though I think he oversells a little bit. He has that sort of comedian edge to him. I like what they're doing with Damian Priest as well. I think he's got a good future ahead of him. After that, I'm not sure. I don't know, unfortunately, that many people in NXT at the moment. Thanks for stopping by, Abraham. Hopefully see you soon. Have a good night. So I'll go with Damian Priest for the male. So Damian Priest, Dakota Kai. Right, I do not have any questions coming in at the moment. Thank you to all the 12 people watching at the moment, anyone who has dropped in even briefly, and anyone who is watching this on catch-up. Please do remember to click like when you visit. And we are now going to go into the SummerSlam preview. For anyone who has not joined these channels before, just by the way, if I'm speaking too quickly, please do let me know. I'm trying to keep up with a lot of questions, and I do get told quite often that I speak far too fast, so please do let me know. I did mention that Apollo Crews versus MVP would be on the pre-show. This match was not originally planned to be Crews versus MVP. The original plan for SummerSlam was Crews versus Bobby Lashley on the main card for the United States Championship, with Bobby Lashley winning the championship. However, there have been a lot of people backstage very impressed with Apollo Crews. MVP has sort of been involved in the writing process for everything he is doing, and even though he is personally getting the benefits here, he is trying to push a lot more people than just the intended Bobby Lashley push. For example, Ricochet and Cedric Alexander back on TV, Mustafa Ali back on TV, even though it was brief and in losing sides, and of course Shelton Benjamin, a lot more attention on him at the moment. So while MVP is in the most important spot right now, as it were, it's not really just for his benefit. So it's not a problem for me that they've changed the match. I do believe Apollo Crews will retain, and I believe they will then move into the match with Bobby Lashley that they were planning to do. I did have concerns previously about what would happen with Apollo Crews after he lost the championship. I'm not so concerned anymore. Christian Reeves says, thanks for everything. Enjoy SummerSlam and keep up the great work. Thank you, Christian. I hope you have a great night. Matthew Charles says, oh, before I sleep, how are you now after your battle with COVID? Feeling better? It's been quite a while since I had COVID. That was April, maybe May. I am feeling a lot better. I feel I was very lucky with not having that much in the way of symptoms, even though it was quite difficult. And I did lose quite a bit of weight and muscle. I found it very difficult to walk immediately after recovering, particularly for a prolonged period. COVID's no joke. COVID's very serious. But thankfully, I'm out of the woods. And even though I know that it's possible I could get it again, I feel confident I am now more equipped to handle it. But thank you for checking in and asking. Right, I've laid out the matches to cover. Firstly, I've got the street fight between Seth Rollins and Dominic Mysterio. I am very excited to see the debut of Dominic Mysterio. The primary reason for this is because I have heard so many different people backstage in WWE telling me that this guy is going to be a star, telling me that Dominic is going to be the next big thing. The street fight will cover any issues with him being maybe a bit too green. He hasn't had as much training as they were initially planning because Lance Storm, who would have been working with him, has been released by the WWE. Not just furloughed at this point, released. The street fight also means that Rey Mysterio, who will be in Dominic's corner, can get involved. It also means that Buddy Murphy can get involved. I expect Seth Rollins to win this, but I do hope we're going to see sort of the ghosts of the Messiah's past. Seth has been working in this particular group for a long time. There are lots of little divisions on Raw. Now is a great time to break out of that and move to different people. So I think Seth should win this, but maybe afterwards he could take a beating from Humberto Carrillo, Aleister Black, Rey Mysterio, and Kevin Owens probably, who's not on the card tonight. I think that would be a great way to change the way that things are working now, and maybe then we can have Apollo Crews versus Seth Rollins. I think that would be a bit more interesting myself. Swaggy says, it seems like NXT is going to lose some pillars of the brand in the next WWE draft. Who do you think from Raw or SmackDown would move to NXT to help retool that roster? Very good question. There are a lot of people who've been asking to go back to NXT. I reported on this back in December that Triple H and Vince McMahon are keeping a short list of people. Also in December, I reported the next Superstar Shakeup would feature a lot of back and forth from Raw and SmackDown to NXT. There are a number of names that have been mentioned to me, Naomi being one of them, Ricochet being another one. People who have actually been very well bolstered by their time on the main roster, but who I feel would very much enjoy being in NXT for a while. Asuka is a possibility, but very unlikely. And I feel there are a couple more who maybe haven't really hit the heights. Dana Brooke, for example, could add quite a bit to the women's division there, I feel. I feel Brooke versus Ripley, Brooke versus Raquel Gonzalez could be exciting matches. Going the other way, I think it's high time Johnny Gargano and Candice LeRae came up, and I would love to see Rhea Ripley on the main roster as of now. When it comes to retooling, Raw and SmackDown need the changes the most. They need faces in the women's division. They need some top-level faces. They need Rhea Ripley, but we are where we are. Next match I want to talk about is the Loser Leaves WWE match between Mandy Rose and Sonya Deville. And in case you can't work out by the fact I just heard my tone drop, I'm not happy with the situation here. I've reported on Sportskeeda, if you haven't already checked that out, please do, that the WWE contacted Deville and Rose immediately after hearing about the situation with the home invasion and said to the both of them, look, if you want us to change the match, that is what we'll do. You just tell us what you want us to do. This is what they've gone with. It allows Deville to take some time off and potentially return and have her head shaved as she intended to pretty much immediately upon returning. I really hope that she does return. There are some concerns in WWE that the more famous she gets, obviously that makes it more likely that she's not going to want to return, because the more famous you get, the more likely you are to encounter these things, and she's not the first person in the WWE to suffer home invasions. I hope she feels safe and comfortable returning sooner rather than later. For me, Mandy Rose does win this match, and for me, Mandy Rose then moves into contention for the SmackDown Women's Championship. I think she needs to move into that contention sooner rather than later and keep up the momentum going. I will mention Asuka versus Bayley at this point as well. I do believe Bayley retains going into that match with Mandy Rose. I don't think Asuka will win the SmackDown Women's Championship, primarily because if Asuka moves to SmackDown, as she would have to if she won that championship, there are no top-level faces left on Raw. You would have Sasha Banks, you would have Nia Jax, you would have Shayna Baszler. Then they would be your top three. All three are heels, and it would be a while before you get down to the level where you have, for example, Natalya, who would be next in line, also a heel. So a difficult situation. Also on Asuka versus Banks, I believe Asuka will be losing that match as well, but I would not be betting my house on it, I tell you that much. Sasha Banks losing here seems the more obvious option, even though that means another very short championship reign for Sasha Banks. Guinness Gamers says, hi Tom, welcome Guinness Gamers. You've been here for a long time following this particular YouTube channel, and I am very glad you are still here now. Jacob Mendoza says, what's the next pay-per-view after Payback? I'm honestly not sure, so let's Google that. Let's just find out. Oop, I've accidentally said Goggle instead of Google. Just to make sure, because I don't want to say anything wrong. WWE 2020 pay-per-views. There's a schedule on CBS Sports. And what we got? The schedule is Clash of Champions on September 27th. Interesting. Clash of Champions meaning that every championship will be on the line. That's going to be a difficult one. That does make sense, though, given at Payback, Sasha Banks and Bayley are defending the Women's Tag Team Championships. I suspect they won't be keeping them. Jagged says, I read this week that higher-ups in NXT are into Ridge Holland. Is it the case still due to the awkward landing that Gargano had on this week's NXT? Yes, there is no blame going to Ridge Holland about that particular spot. It is believed to be just an accident, and Johnny Gargano has stepped up and said it wasn't just Ridge Holland's fault, in that it was also a bit of his fault. It's an accident. Accidents happen. Also, to my knowledge, Johnny Gargano, perfectly fine. They did pause the taping to check on him past the flying colours. Guinness Gamer says, what do you think the "you'll never see it coming" tagline means for tonight, Tom? My suspicion, as I did mention earlier, is that I think the McIntyre versus Orton match will go to a no contest with Retribution getting involved. I think that's what you'll never see coming, but also Alexa Bliss siding with either the Fiend or Braun Strowman, won't be saying who, could be a key indicator in that one. I also really like that they've put that tagline in, but they haven't really mentioned it. It's not like the horror show at Extreme Rules where they're mentioning it every couple of minutes. It's on the graphics. It hasn't really been mentioned by commentary. That is a very good way of doing it. 3 matches left on my preview. I have the Street Profits versus Team Vega, that being Andrade and Angel Garza. And I do believe the Street Profits retain here, and I believe at the same time we will see a new challenger for them. Either a returning Authors of Pain, who are due back soon, or potentially I would like to see Imperium come up from NXT, even just briefly, as the NXT Tag Team Champions, that being Fabian Aichner and Marcel Bartel. I think they could add a lot to it, even if it's just a very brief feud. It's also worth mentioning that technically, even on the SmackDown side, the Forgotten Sons are still a thing, but nobody wants to work with them, so maybe they move to Raw for a bit. I still don't think anyone will want to work with them. By the way, for anyone wondering where the Forgotten Sons are, yeah, nobody wants to work with them, so they can't get back on TV. Guinness Gamer says, I've seen on Twitter you've been cryptic about the Bliss Bray Braun story. Do you have some inside info? I do a little bit. When Alexa Bliss was first attacked by the Fiend, I got word of that during the SmackDown show when it happened, about 20 minutes into the show, which is why I was cryptic, because I don't want to spoil things. I don't feel it's right of a wrestling journalist to say, okay, here's what's happening during this show. I don't think that's right. So what I do is I allude to things. Now, a lot of people thought I was posting a spoiler when at the beginning of the match I said, you should probably keep an eye on Alexa Bliss. Don't let her out of your sight. What people thought I meant was, oh, you've spoiled it. Alexa Bliss is turning heel. She didn't though, did she? I do have some more info. I will not be posting spoilers or sharing spoilers at this time, primarily because I don't want to ruin any stories. Also, I think it's a good story. So I will share my opinion, but I will not share spoilers. I do have a little bit more information. Everything Pro Wrestling says, hey Tom, by all means check out Everything Pro Wrestling's YouTube channel. They do produce very good content. I have been on there, as a fact. Swaggy says, I'm not going to blame too much on the WWE on their roster, but WWE needs to balance their rosters well in this WWE draft. What's your thoughts? I completely agree. I think the draft is overdue, and I actually know the draft is overdue because there was supposed to be a superstar shakeup in April, right after WrestleMania, where they would have rebalanced everything, and NXT would have been involved in that. That was the plan, but with no fans, they pushed it back and back and back and back, and now we're looking at April for a draft, and it is long overdue. The women's divisions in particular need some changes. They really do. Right, the next match in my preview is The Fiend versus Braun Strowman. I mentioned it a little bit there. We are definitely going to see Alexa Bliss getting involved here. We know that, but whose side is she going to be on? Regardless of whose side she's on, I expect The Fiend to come away with the championship here. This could also potentially lead to a return for Roman Reigns, but I will say I don't believe Roman Reigns will return until there is a vaccine, so I'm not sure that is going to happen. My belief is that Big E will come next, or maybe a feud with Otis, because there's no one else left, really. The Fiend winning takes the championship from Strowman to The Fiend, but I do believe The Fiend is the pinnacle of SmackDown right now, and there is a large gap between him and Braun Strowman, and then an even larger gap between him and everyone else on the roster. They really need to start elevating some people on SmackDown, and I think having someone have a feud with Braun Strowman would be a great way to do that. Maybe Keith Lee. Keith Lee versus Braun Strowman could be a lot of fun. Guinness Gamer says, who do you think from the main roster would be suited to go down to NXT? I did mention this a little bit earlier. I think Naomi, Ricochet, people on that level who maybe have not hit the heights that they expected on the main roster should be given the opportunity to go to NXT. Asuka is someone that has been mentioned, but I don't believe it likely that they will let her go down to NXT, even though she has multiple times said to Triple H and Vince McMahon that she wants to. The last match in my preview is Drew McIntyre versus Randy Orton. I've mentioned it a couple of times already in response to questions, but I believe this match will go to a no contest, with Retribution getting involved and in some way getting involved with the Thunderdome. This, I believe, will lead to a rematch that will headline Payback. Now, McIntyre versus Orton is one of those. I don't care who wins as long as they win clean, because the storylines that come from this are definitely interesting either way. But my concern is, and I was asked this earlier, if we get Orton winning, holding the championship until feuding with Edge going into WrestleMania, what does Drew McIntyre do? Do we get a revisit of Drew McIntyre versus Bobby Lashley? Do we get a revisit of Drew McIntyre versus Seth Rollins? Do we get a revisit of Drew McIntyre versus Andrade? No, Drew McIntyre has already fought with everyone. Or are we going to see Drew McIntyre kill time until the draft and move across to SmackDown and get Drew McIntyre versus The Fiend? Not the worst plan, and I think that would be very good for Drew McIntyre, but for a company that is so high on McIntyre and so behind him, I don't feel he'll be losing the championship just yet, or at the very least he will lose it and there will be a rematch, for example in Hell in a Cell. I think this feud will go on for a while between McIntyre and Orton. To confirm, there will be no championship matches at Survivor Series. I mean, a lot of people say, oh, he'll lose at SummerSlam and then win it back at Survivor Series. There will be no championship matches at Survivor Series. The headliner for Survivor Series will almost undoubtedly be the WWE versus Universal versus NXT champion. So at the moment that's Cross, versus Fiend versus McIntyre. Another reason I believe McIntyre is retaining is because he would technically be the only face of that bunch. Jacob Mendoza says, what's your opinion of Payback a week away from SummerSlam? They're using it as an overflow pay-per-view. There will be some rematches. There will also be some new matches. You may expect, for example, Styles versus Hardy to appear there. Not the worst idea as long as it's new and fresh. And to be fair, that's very beneficial for me because it means I might get to go to bed before 6 a.m. tonight. Jagged says, is there any plans for Lacey Evans? I'm a huge fan of hers, but she seems stagnant in the SmackDown women's division. I agree there. The plan was changed very recently. She was always supposed to be a face going forwards, but they decided to roll wholeheartedly with Bayley, which means that Lacey Evans didn't get the push that was originally planned. Now she's a heel again, just because they were trying to give the lower women's card something to do, but people have really attached to Naomi, so they couldn't complete what they wanted to, which was Lacey Evans beating Naomi, beating Dana Brooke, beating Tamina, and then losing to Naomi, because it would look like Naomi was being buried. So there was a plan, there isn't right now. Jermaine Presley says, I believe Sasha is winning clean and Bayley is winning with Sasha's help, and I believe Sasha and Bayley will lose the tag titles at Payback, which set up title for title match down the line. If they both win, the title for title match down the line will be Survivor Series, but it will also feature Io Shirai. Sasha Banks versus Bayley versus Io Shirai is a very interesting match in my opinion. Guinness Gamer says, any chance Otis could cash in on Braun during the match, keeps the title off the Fiend, and he doesn't have to be pinned. I don't think that's the worst idea. I think cashing in a triple threat match is the best chance Otis has to do this, but I also believe the Fiend has made it very clear that he isn't coming after Braun Strowman, he's coming after the championship, which means that Otis will not be safe even if he wins that. He would be buried by the Fiend, because everyone is going to be buried by the Fiend. The Fiend is the big deal right now. Vince McMahon is the Fiend's biggest cheerleader. The Fiend is going over huge in every way possible. Guinness Gamer says, I really hope you're right about Drew retaining, my favourite champ since Bryan. Jermaine Presley says, I hope your day is going great. Also be safe to you and your family. Thank you very much, Jermaine. I appreciate you saying that. That is everything for my preview. Thank you to the 10 people still watching. Thank you to the 13 people who've clicked like. I have no more questions. So at this point, I am going to call it. I've been Tom Colohue. This has been a preview for SummerSlam as well as a review of NXT Takeover. If you'd like to follow me, if you don't already, on Twitter at Colohue, that is Colohue. I will be live streaming SummerSlam, starting with the pre-show, which starts in about 15 minutes. Please do join me there, engage, and I will see you guys the next time we do one of these live stream sessions. Thank you very much